We crew felt the weight of the world on our shoulders. We knew that everyone would be looking at us tonight. We want to remember Michael Collins, who may have had the toughest job on Apollo 11. Just before his passing in 2021, Michael Collins, Apollo 11's often overlooked third astronaut, finally spoke up about what he saw during those silent, solitary hours while orbiting the moon, something he'd kept hidden all these years. As Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin made history on the lunar surface, Michael was alone on the far side, facing something entirely his own. Tune in as his haunting final admission about what he saw could forever change how we see the Apollo 11 mission, the unseen side of Apollo 11. Imagine being completely alone in space, orbiting the moon with no connection to Earth, just endless silence and an infinite view of stars. This is what Michael Collins, an often overlooked hero of the Apollo 11 mission, experienced. While Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin became famous for stepping onto the moon, Michael was the one orbiting alone, making sure they could all return safely. But what if, in those lonely hours, he encountered something that shook him deeply, something he felt he had to share years later, a truth NASA had kept quiet? But what if, in that silence, he saw something unimaginable, something he couldn't reveal until years later, a truth NASA hid from the world? Michael Collins, as astronaut often overshadowed by his legendary Apollo 11 crewmates, carried a secret, a truth that he only chose to reveal before his death. This secret, hidden from the public eye for decades, would change how we see that iconic mission. What was it that he finally admitted, and why did he keep it hidden for so long? He was known as the man who stayed behind while Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin took humanity's first steps on the moon, but his story, the part that went untold, is far more profound than anyone knew. Imagine the isolation of being alone in lunar orbit, with nothing but silence in the vast, cold darkness of space surrounding you. Was this silence where he uncovered something deeper, something unspeakable? Born on October 31, 1930, in Rome, his life was shaped by the shadow of great responsibilities. His father was a major general in the U.S. Army, and from a young age, he was trained in the values of duty, discipline, and courage. But those values would be tested in ways no one could have foreseen when he became part of the Apollo mission. Growing up, he moved from place to place, Italy, Puerto Rico, the United States, experiencing cultures from all over the world. He developed a fascination with flying early on, a fascination fueled by the stories of aviators like Charles Lindbergh. His dreams soared high, but none could have predicted just how far he would actually go or how alone he would end up feeling in the vastness of space. He was a dedicated student, especially in science, and he knew he wanted to fly. He enrolled in the United States Military Academy at West Point and graduated near the top of his class in 1952. His military training sharpened his skills, but it was only the beginning of a journey that would take him to the very edge of human experience. After West Point, he chose the Air Force, driven by his need to fly the most advanced aircraft of the time. It was at Columbus Air Force Base where he earned his wings, and where his journey really took off. But even as he pushed forward, the idea of space, the final frontier, called to him like a whisper he couldn't ignore. Stationed at George Air Force Base, he flew the F-86 Sabre, a fighter jet used in the Korean War. This was thrilling but also dangerous. He lost friends along the way, friends whose memories stayed with him long after their missions ended. These experiences gave him a deep respect for the fragility of life and perhaps planted the seeds for the secret he would eventually carry. In 1960, he took another step toward the stars. He was accepted into the U.S. Air Force Experimental Flight Test Pilot School. Here, at Edwards Air Force Base, he learned to push the boundaries of aviation. Among the projects was the infamous X-15, a rocket-powered plane that could touch the very edge of space. These daring flights weren't just tests of the technology, they were tests of spirit. He began to look beyond Earth's atmosphere, his eyes set on the stars. When NASA announced its astronaut selection process, he knew he had to apply. But the first time, in 1962, he wasn't chosen. It was a disappointment, but he wasn't the kind of man to give up. He applied again, and in 1963, his persistence paid off. He was selected as part of NASA's third group of astronauts. His dreams were beginning to align with destiny. The Gemini program was his entry into space, a crucial stepping stone on the path to the moon. In 1966, he flew in Gemini 10. It was an intense mission, and he became the first astronaut to conduct 2 spacewalks. The exhaustion, the isolation, the feeling of floating in the unknown, these were experiences that few could understand, but they were also moments of revelation. What did he see out there, alone in the dark void? Originally, he was supposed to be part of Apollo 8, but an injury forced him to take a step back. After a successful recovery, he found himself on the Apollo 11 mission, assigned as the command module pilot. His role was different. While Armstrong and Aldrin went to the lunar surface, he would stay behind in the command module, Columbia. He would be alone, circling the moon, cut off from Earth and even from his crew, completely isolated. Imagine being the sole human on the far side of the moon, no contact, no connection, just the emptiness of space. For 47 minutes on each orbit, he was on his own, completely cut off from all of humanity. What thoughts crossed his mind in those moments? Did he discover something about the universe, about himself, that he could not put into words? In interviews after the mission, he often described his time alone in positive terms. He talked about enjoying the quiet, the beauty of the moon, and the Earth hanging in the distance. But as the years went on, hints of something deeper began to emerge. He spoke of a strange presence he felt during those long, lonely orbits. Was it merely his imagination? Or was it something more, a realization about the universe?
He described it as a presence, something that was there with him even when no one else was. Was it the weight of his own thoughts, amplified by the vast emptiness of space, or was it something more mysterious, something that science could not explain? His story is often overshadowed by the triumphant moon landing, but his experience, the solitude, the strange feelings, the profound reflections, is a reminder that space exploration is not just about technology or science. It's also about the human spirit, about confronting the unknown and coming to terms with the vast mysteries that lie beyond our world. What did he truly see during those lonely hours in lunar orbit? Was it just the shadows of his own mind, or did he touch on something far deeper, a secret that he carried with him until his final days? Perhaps, in the end, the real mystery of Apollo 11 is not just what happened on the surface of the moon, but what happened in the silence of space, with only him and the stars. The mystery surrounding the event might remain unsolved indefinitely. Michael's last statement on the incident stirred curiosity and unease. He had expressed a sensation of encountering an unexplainable presence, something beyond the grasp of ordinary understanding. This declaration led to a myriad of speculations and discussions. People wondered what it was that Michael had experienced. Could it be something supernatural, or merely a trick of the mind brought on by stress or the environment? His words painted a picture of a man touched by something extraordinary, something that defied explanation and left more questions than answers. As the story of his experience spread, it captured the imaginations of many, prompting them to ponder the vast unknowns of human experience. And maybe, just maybe, some things are meant to stay beyond our understanding. A countdown to history, the years before Apollo 11 were filled with some of the most demanding training NASA had ever conducted. Michael Collins, alongside Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, spent countless hours in simulators. They practiced every single part of the mission, from weightlessness to docking and re-entry. These sessions weren't just drills, they were painstaking rehearsals for making history. Every second of their training was meant to prepare them for the unknown, ensuring they could handle anything that came their way. Imagine being on the brink of something no human had ever done before. Collins knew the stakes. Each practice run, every stressful situation simulated, mattered for a successful outcome. Would all this training pay off, or would the unforgiving space prove too great a challenge? The command module held a unique place for him. While Neil and Buzz would take the lunar leap, he would be alone orbiting the moon, ready to ensure their safe return. His skills as a test pilot had prepared him for critical split-second decisions, but nothing could completely ready him for the sense of isolation or the weight of responsibility he would soon feel. The astronauts underwent grueling physical training. Exercise became a discipline, building strength and stamina. Their bodies had to endure space travel's rigors, zero gravity, tight quarters, and the strange effects of a low-gravity environment. They would exercise to stay physically ready, but it was also about mental endurance. Physical health and mental toughness were their tools for survival. Training was also about mastering every detail, even when it seemed exhausting and repetitive. The Command Module Simulator was just one example of the many challenges they had to conquer. From the exact timing of maneuvers to the precise coordinates they had to remember, every element was like a second language. They memorized controls, their minds conditioned to respond without hesitation. This preparation wasn't merely about familiarity, it was about internalizing every second of the mission.